Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional Webinar Series. We've got about one more minute, so people are still logging on. Want to give everybody a chance to, log on before we get started. If you'd like, what we'd encourage you to do, and I see some people are already doing it, typing in the chat box where they're from. You might also, I'd encourage people to put in their favorite color in the landscape as a shout out to today's webinar. So what color do you like seeing in your landscape? What's your favorite color? Flower or plants? That might be fun. Yeah, red is stunning in the landscape. And it is 10 o'clock now. And it looks like most people have it's slowing down anyway, as far as people coming in the room. So once again, I want to say good morning and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional Webinar Series. Today's webinar is Color in the Landscape with Dr. Gail Hansen. Your microphones have been muted, so please put your questions in the Q&A box. And then we're going to encourage you to use the chat box for just general comments and observation that don't require an answer. But if you'd like an answer, go ahead and put that in the chat box, which will also, or in the Q&A box that you'll also find at the bottom of your screen. And then I want to remind people this webinar is approved for one FNGLA, Florida Water Star, LIAF, and DBPR Landscape Architecture CEU, as well as FSTAC CEU. There is a $10 administration fee to receive a certificate of continuing education. And I'll put that link in the chat box to make payment if you have not already done so. We'll submit the CEUs for licensing to the licensing agency tomorrow. So make sure if you want that CEU to go ahead and do that by the end of the day. You'll receive a certificate of completion by Friday. So, please try to refrain from email me before that. You should get it, before Friday or by Friday at the latest. And then once again, this is part of a monthly webinar series that's held on the second Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. We will continue that schedule into 2023. And our next webinar is Key Plants, Key Pests with our very own Tom Wickman presenting that. And you will also see one more last bit of housekeeping. You'll see a survey invitation pop up. Please take a moment to fill this out as it really helps determine what educational programs we're going to offer in the future. And then now I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Dr. Gail Hansen. Dr. Hansen is an associate professor at the University of Florida and the State Extension Specialist for Sustainable Landscape Design and Urban Ecology. Her teaching extension programs address sustainable science-based and art-centered landscape design practices that take into account the social dimension of green urban environments, environmental protection, and the quality of life for urban dwellers. Dr. Hansen is a faculty in the Center for Land Use Efficiency and an advisor to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, as well as the Extension Specialist for Landscape Design, as I mentioned earlier. So thank you so much for being with us here today. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Gail Hansen.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar. I think that talking about color in the landscape is an appropriate presentation for the season. It's a very cheerful and colorful season. So let's talk about color in the landscape. So you can see this first slide doesn't look very colorful, maybe even not that interesting. But as soon as we add color to it, things come alive. And suddenly it looks a lot more interesting to talk about color. So today I'm going to talk about color theory and how we can apply it to our designs in the landscape. So the first thing that we want to think about is why is color so important in the landscape? I mean, why should we really think about it? And why should we care about how we select our colors for the landscape? Well, one of the things about color is it is actually very powerful in our lives. It actually does have an influence on our physical health, on our mental health, and on our emotions. And in fact, it's such a powerful idea attached to our emotions that we even give certain emotions a color. So I put on the slide here some of the different colors that we associate with different emotions. For example, if you're feeling blue, it means that you're just not feeling very well. But if you're true blue, it means that you're a very loyal person. If you're seeing red, you might be angry. Black-hearted means that you are maybe a mean-spirited person or an evil person. If you're tickled pink, it means that you're happy. And if you're green with envy, it means that you are probably a very jealous person. So you can see all these different emotions, from happy to sad to envious, have a color attached to them. And that's how we think about color in our life, and how it affects our mental health and also our physical health. So a lot of people study color psychology and how it affects us. And that's because color influences how we act and how we feel. And it depends on our culture, it depends on history, and also our experiences. Some colors do have a common worldwide meaning. Red, for almost all cultures, represents life. And that is because, for humans, our blood is red. And so we associate that with life. White, for all cultures around the world, is a symbol of truce. Also a symbol of peace. And purple is also a symbol of knowledge. And green, safety, but also a lot of other things associated with green. And one of the reasons why green is associated with safety, which sounds like kind of a weird thing to associate green with, is because many cultures around the world use green to indicate where places where people can go for safety, like pharmacies or hospitals and so forth. But green is also known, has symbolism and meaning for health, calmness, comfort. Just reading some of these off the word cloud: wisdom, cleanliness, life, freshness. Green has a lot of different symbols in our world, and that's appropriate because we have a lot of green in our landscapes. Obviously, advertisers use color for powerful messages that they want to send about their products. So yellow could mean sunny and warm. Black is usually associated with sophistication and power. Brown is a warm color that's associated with sweetness and richness. And probably because we associate it partly with chocolate or also with the earth. Green, fresh and healthy. Blue, we know, calms us down, so it's associated with being peaceful and cool. And red, obviously, love and passion. So it has not escaped the advertisers and product makers that certain colors for their products can carry some very powerful meanings. It also affects our behavior. And so I put these two pictures in here because I want to talk about behavior specifically around eating. So studies have shown that warm environments, warm color environments, such as the picture in the top of the kind of pinkish red eating area, will actually increase our metabolism and make us want to eat more. And that is why, if you look at all the logos at the bottom, that's why most fast food places and a lot of other restaurants use warm colors, such as reds and yellows and oranges, in their logos and in their advertisement, because we know that people associate that with excitement, with an increased metabolism and thoughts of eating more. On the other hand, if you have a very cool environment, like the gathering place in the top right corner, cool environments slow our metabolism down, make us feel more calm, make us feel more peaceful, and we don't feel as hungry, so we don't eat as much. So that's why you rarely ever see a restaurant that is decorated in cool colors. So if you have an entertainment area and you want people to be more calm and quiet, maybe cool, blues and greens is a better color. We also know that it influences our shopping behavior. So certain colors will make people buy more items. So those are just a couple of examples of how color can affect how we behave. And honestly, we don't even realize that we're behaving certain ways because of the influence of color. So how many colors are there? Or another question might be, how many colors can we see? And that's because the way that we see color is, color really doesn't exist except for in the brain and eye connection. So people who study color estimate that humans can see between 1 and 7 million colors, which is actually really surprising that we can see so many colors. But we know that there's an infinite variety of colors because you can take one color and just add a little bit of black or white to it and make all different shades of color. So I did a little experiment once, and I went over to Lowe's and Home Depot, and I counted how many colors that they had in their paint selection, where they have the paint color chips, because I was curious about how many colors, since just going to the store and picking out colors is so overwhelming because there's so many different colors. I thought there must be a lot there. Well, when I counted it up, it was only about 500 different colors in the paint chips at the store. So you can imagine how many different colors there are in a million or up to 7 million colors that we can see. And there are some people who actually can see over 100 million colors, and it's a condition called tetrachromacy. And it is actually a condition that you would not want to have, because people say it's very exhausting to have that condition because you see colors within colors. And so I think that would be very odd. At first, it sounds kind of cool that you could be able to see so many different colors, but not really. So I always get this question when I talk about color in the landscape, and people always want to know if white and black are actually colors. And so my answer to that question is it depends. It depends on if you're talking to a scientist who is looking at color through the light prism, or if you're talking to an artist who talks about color in terms of pigments. So for the scientists, they would say, well, white, if you see a white object, it means that it has reflected back all the rays of light in the prism. On the other hand, black, if you see a black object, it means that that object has absorbed all rays of light. However, artists say, well, light and black are pigments because obviously I can go to the store and I can ask for a can of white paint or a can of black paint. And so we don't technically call them colors, we call them pigments. And white, yes, is a pigment, but you can't get it by mixing other colors. You have to use a white pigment. And usually that comes from minerals and primarily chalk that we get from the earth. And black, on the other hand, is when we take all the different colors, all the different pigments, and we blend them all together, and then we get what we consider the black pigment, which actually is really a really dark, muddy brown when you mix all the colors together. So if anybody asks you if white and black are colors, well, you can just say, it depends if we want to talk like an artist or a scientist. So a little bit of history about color. Color is not just for artists. A lot of prominent scientists and philosophers and great thinkers in history were also very interested in color. Way back in 340 BC, Aristotle attempted to formalize color relationships. Leonardo da Vinci, the famous artist, is known to have developed different color systems. Isaac Newton, of course, he was the first one to refract light through the prism, and he created the first circular color chart with only 7 colors, and we still use that today. Johann Goethe, who's a great philosopher, a Greek, German philosopher, he disagreed with Newton, and he said it's all about psychology. And this was his color wheel, a picture of his color wheel that he developed, and he associated all these colors with different mental and physical conditions. And even Albert Einstein was really interested in color, and he suggested that color and light consisted of particles, but that's actually a theory that has yet to be proven. So it goes to show that color is very important in all aspects of our life, and many prominent people have been very interested in it. So why should we use color theory? Well, we want to create color harmony, something that is really pleasing to your eye and gives you a really good visual experience. So honestly, when we talk about color theory in relation to landscapes, if you are actually doing a design for your own yard, my suggestion would be that you just use the colors that you like and that you want to see in your landscape, and not worry so much about color theory and whether you have created good color harmony. Because after all, you're the one that's going to look at your landscape, and you're going to be the one who's enjoying it. And maybe, you know, the colors that you like don't harmonize that well. However, if you're going to help design somebody else's landscape, if you have a client that you're working with, you might want to study up a little bit on color theory so that you can make sure that the design you do for someone else is harmonious and pleasing to the eye. So I wanted to show you this 15-stage color wheel because it was developed by the British Royal Horticultural Society. So it's a little bit different from the 12-stage color wheel that we use that I'll talk about in a minute. But what was unique about this one was that they actually developed this by using petals from flowers that they took off flowers, and they took this wide range of these petals and developed these colors. And you can see that the most saturated pure color is on the outer ring, and then they added white as they go inward until in the center we get what we used to refer to as the pastel colors. What's interesting about this color wheel, and you'll notice is very different from the one that I'm going to show you next, is that there's a lot of different colors associated with purple and violet. We have like violet, blue, violet, purple, red, purple. So that might make you think that most of the flowers in nature are purple, some sort of purple color. But that's not the case. And so later on, I'll tell you what the most common flower color is. So if we compare this wheel then to this, which is the 12-stage color wheel, which is the one that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. You probably used this color wheel when you were, I don't know, back in the 3rd or 4th grade, maybe even the 2nd grade, when you were being taught about color. So there's several things that this color wheel can help you with when you're trying to figure out colors that go well together. And in fact, this color wheel is all you need to have to create these different color schemes and have color harmony. So for example, when we look at this color wheel, just to orient you, the primary colors, and I'm sure you remember this from elementary school, are yellow, red, and blue. And they're primary because they cannot be made from any other colors. The secondary colors are orange, green, and violet because they're a mix of 2 primary colors. And then all the colors on the wheel that have a double name, like yellow, orange, and yellow, green, they're called tertiary colors, and they are made from a primary and a secondary color. So as we look at this, and we look at 3 hues, which is another name for color, next to each other on the color wheel. Those are called analogous colors. They go well together. And the reason is they share certain properties. So yellow, orange, yellow, and yellow, green is a good color combination. They will look good together and be harmonious in the landscape. Monochromatic means one hue with variations in lightness and darkness. So in the landscape, though, we never have a truly monochromatic unless it's an all green landscape. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's usually green with another color. But if we look at the color blue, for example, we'll see that blue is the one pure hue. And then it shows light blue, medium blue, and dark blue. And that's the color blue with white, gray, or black added to it. So that would be monochromatic. Complementary are two hues that are opposite each other on the color wheel. And the one that we see all the time in nature, which is very common, is violet and yellow. So you'll see a lot of flowers that have, for example, some sort of a purple or violet petals with a yellow in the center, or vice versa. So very common color combination in nature. And in fact, nature is, Mother Nature is a very good artist, and it would be ideal to kind of study the color combinations that we have in nature and try to mimic those. And then triadic are three hues that are equally spaced around the color wheel, and those go well together. So the classic one is yellow, red, and blue, the primary colors, or orange, green, and violet is another classic combination. So you really only need to know these four color schemes, and they're actually pretty simple. And typically, if you go to any hobby store or art store and you buy this simple color wheel, it'll have instructions on it for how to figure out all these different color schemes. So the other thing I wanted to point out on the color wheel is that you can see where the arrow is splitting it kind of in half. On one half, we have the warm colors, and the other half are the cool colors. And the red, violets, and the yellow, greens, which are right on that line, are bridging colors. They can be warm or cool, depending on what other colors are around them. So let's talk about some of these different colors. The analogous color families are just three groups of 5 color that go from the primary colors. So we're going to talk about red to yellow is our first analogous family, because that's the warm family of colors. And so let's talk about red first. So red is like this really pow color in the landscape. You just can't not look at red when you see it in the landscape. It's a very emotionally intense color. It affects our metabolism and our blood pressure when we see it. It's aggressive. We really have to pay attention. It symbolizes good luck in many cultures. It's actually the first color that infants see. And so it's a color that is very memorable for people. And one way that we get color is, especially the red color, is from these very tiny beetles, cochineal beetles. And the problem, though, with that is that it takes 70,000 of these little beetles that you have to harvest and crush to get just 1 pound of this beautiful, brilliant red color. And they actually do have farms in Peru where they grow prickly pear cactus, because that's the host plant for these small beetles. And they actually do harvest the beetles, and they still use that as a way to get this very deep, intense red color. Most of our other colors, though, come from minerals and from the soil, and also from plant materials. So design notes when using red. Red always makes plants look like they're advancing towards you or are in the foreground. So sometimes it works better if you're using red to actually use it in a small amount because it's so intense, and use it in the front or the, in the layers of your plants in the front of your landscape or the foreground of your view. You can use it to highlight important elements like the gazebo. or use it in your entertainment areas for an area that would feel more like a celebratory or exciting area. So pink is obviously actually red with white added to it. So pink is considered to be a romantic or affectionate color. It's a favorite color, obviously, culturally for little girls. It inspires action and confidence. It's a calming color. It reduces aggression. For example, based on psychological studies, sometimes visiting locker rooms are painted pink, so that the visitor who comes to play, like, in a basketball game or whatever, since pink is calming and reduces aggression, they will paint their locker rooms pink. Only the visiting locker room, though. And also prisons have used pink as a color to calm aggression in people who are in prison. So one interesting thing about pink is, and I didn't have a picture of it here, but is, the familiar pink box that all of our pastries come in. Well, it's a funny kind of interesting history of that, and why they're always in pink boxes. Well, one very simple explanation is because pink is cheaper. The pink boxes are cheaper than the white boxes that pastries used to come in. But the story is, for the United States anyway, that a family from Cambodia had come over to Los Angeles, and they were famous for their donuts that they made and their other pastries. And they started serving them in pink boxes because they were cheaper. And then everybody started loving all their pastries, and they would go to other pastry shops and ask for the pastry in the pink box. And because it was synonymous with really good pastries, so all the pastry shops in the area started using pink boxes. And that's how now we always get our pastries in pink boxes. So some of the design notes for pink. It brings plants forward again, just like the red does. They pop out a little bit more. They're very noticeable in the landscape. Blue and purple are very good harmony colors with pink. We use them to lighten up our shady areas and make it more bright. It links well with almost every other color. It looks good with yellows again, like we said, blues and purples, and green too. The only color that you probably shouldn't pair pink with is red, because they tend to clash with those two, and they're fighting for dominance in the landscape and in our vision. So they don't work very good when you put them together. So orange is another happy, energy, fun-loving color. We associate it a lot with fruits, especially oranges. And so people think about juiciness and ripeness and fruitiness, and good health. A lot of people associate it with vitamin C. It does stimulate our appetite, and we feel more energetic and active when we have orange around us. The thing about orange, though, is adults either love it or they hate it. But children really love orange. It's a bright color, and children, again, just like the red, tend to notice the bright, more intense, more saturated colors early on. So one of the things that's kind of funny about adults loving or hating it is it's a really hard color to wear for some adults. So it's not always the best color, for example, for different sports teams. Like those of us here at UF, orange and blue, of course, complementary colors are our school colors. But I always hear people saying that they hate to wear the all orange color when they go to like football games or basketball games or whatever, because they always say, I never look good in orange. So that's why you see so many people wearing blue and not orange at different sporting events for UF. So design notes. What's really great about orange is it really holds in bright light. So it's a really good tropical color. And we can use it where the very bright reflective light, like if you live along the coast, doesn't fade out the brightness of the orange color. Harmonizes with blue and purple. It's actually a more tropical version of red. A lot of people don't associate really bright, intense red so much with tropical as they do the orange and the intense, deep orange colors. You can use it to warm up a shady area. It's a color that's associated with autumn. So you can see, you know, not so much here in Florida, but in other areas of the country, the orange color leaves are indicative of the season. It's a really good color for a party space because it does, you know, enliven the space. And obviously this patio gathering area in the backyard must be for a Gator fan, because I don't know too many other people who might use orange and blue in their colors for their party area. And then yellow. So yellow is associated with warmth and with cheerfulness, brightness. It does stimulate our nervous system, and it actually is known to activate memory. When people see things in the color of yellow, they remember it better. Now, we notice yellow first, that in any kind of a scene that you look at, if you go out into the landscape or if you go into a room and there's these really bright pops of yellow, that's the first thing our eye will pick up on. Because it's a very luminous color and it's attention getting. It's a very highly saturated chroma to the color, and it almost glows, especially in the landscape. But if you use too much yellow, it can be very fatiguing to the eye. And then you have to shift your gaze to like more of the green in a landscape to kind of rest the eye. So be careful with the amount of yellow that you might use in a landscape, and use it as to highlight a focal point. So some design notes, because it's highest in contrast and visibility, again, it's a color that you don't want to overdo it. Use it to brighten those shady areas. It's also another one of those favorite colors, just like the other warm colors of children. So you can see in these photos that I have here in the upper photo, the yellow dominates. It even dominates over white, which is considered a very bright color in the landscape, and kind of even pushes the red away. And all you really notice until you look a little bit longer is the yellow in the landscape. And then there's some other photos here. The center photo is shows how that bright yellow really stands out in a shade garden, and yellow for an entertainment area. And yellow and green, yellow and purple are the classic. Again, color combination that I was talking about is a complementary color scheme. So the next analogous color family is the yellow to the blue. And those are all the greens that are kind of tucked in between that yellow and blue. So let's talk about those colors. Green is everywhere, and it stands for nature, for growth, for fertility. It helps to relax our muscles. It actually has been shown that if people gaze upon a green colored landscape or anything in the green color, that it improves their creativity. Now the word green actually stands for sustainable. So you see it all the time where companies, when they're developing their products, they call them green products, or if you're trying to be more sustainable, they say go green. So green has now been tagged with that sustainable kind of connotation. We actually have more shades of green than any other color. So you can put more, for example, with green, you can add more yellows and have yellow greens. You can have very light greens, like in the picture at the top. You can have blue greens, very deep greens. So there's all different shades of green, and especially in nature. So we can see those, and some examples here. for design notes, ways to use green. It is the most restful color for the human eye. And that is, behaviorists believe that that's because humans evolved with green, with nature all around them. So we find it comforting, and also because green is a symbol of water too. And they believe as humans evolved, we associated green with water, with life, and it was a calming, restful feeling for people. So you can imagine in that picture at the top with the lounge chairs or the Adirondack chairs, imagine that scene if it was all red instead of green. It certainly wouldn't be very restful if that is what your intent was, to sit and gaze upon a restful landscape. Green is also a really great bridge color, so it's a good thing that it's the most dominant color in the landscape, because it can be a warm or a cool color. It depends on what you pair it with. So if you pair it with reds and yellows, it tends to look cool. But if you pair it with purples and blues, it'll take on a little bit more of a warm feel to it. So it blends with all colors. It's great for color harmony. Again, a very good thing why nature has it dominates with green. And green is a really good color that highlights other light colors. So with a green background, you can see the Japanese lantern there with a green background. The white really pops out. The picture in the center shows not only different types of green, but it also shows how layering with different greens can make a really dynamic and very interesting landscape. So a monoculture or a monocolor of green doesn't have to be boring. And in fact, the picture on the far left, if you study that picture for a while, and I use this in my class and some other presentations that I do, and I always ask people, how many greens can you see in that image? And we have counted up to 8 to 10 different greens in that image. And it's certainly not a boring landscape, but we have, blue greens, for example, yellow greens, medium greens, dark greens, all sorts of greens in there. And so it shows that you can have a landscape that's very interesting and pleasing with just the color green. The key, though, there is you have to have very different shapes or forms, and you have to have different textures, and you have to have different sizes, because that's also, with all these layering, what makes it the landscape more interesting. And blue is a color for tranquility and calmness. It's actually literally slows our metabolism. Studies have shown that if people are in spaces where blue is the dominant color, we feel more calm. And that is why restaurants started using, and I'm sure you've heard this way back, I think it's started happening during the Depression, when restaurants had the blue plate special. Two reasons why they used that: because blue plates were very common, because it was a cheaper manufacturing process to use the color blue. But restaurants also discovered that people ate less food if it was put on a blue plate, and so they could serve less food and people would still be satisfied. So, some color psychology there that was just discovered by, restaurant owners. It's sometimes considered a masculine color, but it is the #1 preferred color for both males and females. And I'll show you some color charts a little bit later on with that show different preferred colors. And they also have found that people are more productive when they're in blue rooms, and behaviorists believe that that's because it is more tranquil. We feel more calm, and we tend to be more productive when our minds are in a calmer state. So a lot of blue, though, in the landscape comes from other sources rather than flowers. In the middle shows berries. We have berries in various shades of blue, and seeds sometimes in various shades of blue. And then, of course, the petals and the flowers. So the picture at the top shows that classic combination of the blue petals and the yellow center, and a complementary color combination there. So some design notes with blue. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to use in the landscape because it tends to take on some different colors. For example, in the picture on the bottom left, that's very dark blue, but it tends to look more violet when it's in shade. So it would read better if it had a little bit more sun. So when you're in the shade, it's better to use the brighter, lighter blues because it contrasts more with the greens in the shade. And that is shown in the picture of the iris at the top there. Using blue will make a space appear larger, and it's a very good color to use in a contemplative space or a chill area. So if you're designing your landscape and you want to go out and just have a place where you can relax and chill, incorporate more blue into other areas of the landscape and not just the plant materials. For example, in your tiles, your furniture, your textiles, and so forth. And then the last analogous color family is blue to red, and we've already talked about blue to red. So let's talk a little bit about the different variations of violet, or sometimes called purple. Technically, violet is the name that people who study color use, but commonly we use purple a lot. It is preferred by children. Again, like blue, it encourages creativity. It symbolizes power and royalty and knowledge. And that's because this was a very difficult color to come by in ancient times. You need about 20,000 of these little tiny little snails called purpura snails to make 1 ounce of a dye that's called Tyrian purple dye. And so in ancient Egyptian times, the royalty were the only ones who were allowed to use the color purple. Legend has it that Cleopatra had barges going up and down the Nile River collecting these little snails for her use. And so since the royalty were the only people who were educated at that time and had more knowledge, the color came to symbolize power and knowledge. So design notes for using purple in the landscape. It again can be a warmer, cool color depending on what is next to it. So the picture at the top shows a lighter purple, and here it looks like a cool color because it's surrounded by oranges and yellows and kind of yellow-green foliage there. So it tends to look a little bit more cooler, also because it's a lighter purple. But then if you look at the picture on the far left, and even on the right, both of those pictures, they tend to look a lot cooler colors because they're darker, for one, and also because there's not as high contrast with the greens and other colors around them. It does add weight and texture. So again, that picture of on the bottom right, you can see that it looks like a lot more texture in that plant material. And the plants tend to visually have a heavier weight to them. It adds depth to a bed. And the reason why it adds depth, if you want to look off in the distance and make it look like your bed is deeper or your space is larger, is because people associate purple with the distance because it's a kind of fool the eye trick. We are used to seeing, for example, purple hills way off in the distance, or purple in sunsets way off in the distance. So we associate that with things far away. And that's why it can make your space look like it's larger or has greater depth. The problem with dark purple, though, is it disappears in the shade. So if you look at the picture in the center, you can see that it's harder to see that purple color. And in fact, if you kind of squint and fog your eyes, the purple doesn't show up very well in that landscape in the shade. And it harmonizes with yellow and orange. So monochromatic color scheme, usually we think of either a white garden or a green garden. Those are kind of your typicals. White stands for light, goodness, purity. White flowers tend to have a stronger scent. It's considered a summer color. White goes with all colors, and in fact, it makes other colors look brighter and more saturated when you put white next to them. So it's a really good color to pop into a bed of plants with other colors. And actually, white is the most common flower color. So even though the British Royal Horticultural Society had a lot of purples on their color wheel, more flowers come in white than in purple. So design notes: brighten up a shady spot, highlight a focal point like the bench in the bottom photo. It tends to bring out the true hues or color of other colors. So the picture on the top shows how white is making the blues and purples and oranges and yellows look even brighter and more intense. And it also can create a sense of space because you can see white way off in the distance. So again, if you look at this picture on the top, you can see the bright pops of white off in the distance. So it tends to make that yard look like it has more depth and more space. As opposed to if you're in your mind's eye, we're looking at, say, green instead of white. It wouldn't look like it extends so far in the distance. So a couple of color concepts when you are using color. Warm colors always appear closer and make a space feel smaller. Cool colors appear distant and make the space feel larger. And so on the bottom, you can see the warm colors and cool colors being bridged by green, because again, green can be warm or cool depending on what it is next to. And so it's the ultimate color that ties everything together. And you can see here in this photo how all those red flowers feel like they're closer to you. You almost feel like you could reach out and touch those red colors, and they seem almost to be floating and pushed forward. Concept 2 is that you want to have balance between your pairs of colors. You want to use the smaller amount of the brightest colors. And remember how we talked about yellow having the highest chroma or saturation. So you want to use just small amounts of yellow paired with larger amounts of all the other colors. On the opposite end of the spectrum, violet is the deepest color, not the brightest. It's very saturated chroma, but it's deeper and darker. So you can use more violet and use less of the other colors. So in this picture of this play area, in your mind's eye, just try to picture if we were to flip these colors and all of the yellow in that image were blue and all of the blue is yellow. So if you can imagine that for just a minute, I'm sure that you would say that this is not a very comfortable area if all the blue were yellow. It would be too much of that very intense high chroma color. As it is, it's a very playful space for kids, and it's a perfect amount of yellow and blue in terms of balance. Same with nature. If you look at the large amount of blue in the flower and that tiny dot of yellow in the center, a perfect balance of those colors. So how do you go about choosing a color scheme? Well, one thing you can do is you can look at the building or hardscape colors, and you can either blend with them or you can contrast. So the picture on the bottom right is obviously a cottage, kind of a fantastical little cottage garden with a very interesting color on the building. So you see that magenta building with the yellow shutters. So the theme of the color for this garden was obviously a whimsical color with purples and yellows. They even have, the purple picket fence and the yellow brick road there. So definitely a theme going on there with color and with the cottage garden idea. You can also look at the type of use in the space. Do you want it for entertaining or rest? So obviously the warm colors, bright colors like the orange will energize your guests. And if you want to make, again, a space look smaller or larger, you can use different colors to do that. And I put this color chip in here because another good way for you to choose a color scheme is to simply look at the colors that the paint companies put out and see what kind of colors that they put together as analogous or good colors that go well together, and kind of copy what they have. Other reasons for choosing a color scheme, it depends on the light conditions. If it's a very shady area, you might want to use the lighter colors and the warmer colors. Also, your garden type or your theme. A tropical garden might have different colors in it than a cottage garden or a contemporary garden. So for example, the black and white is a contemporary garden. So very different color theme from the one you saw in the previous slide with the cottage garden. And also think about the time of day that the space is used. So you might want to use brighter, lighter colors if it's used at night, like with the fire pit in the lower right, or you might want to use some calmer, kind of cooler, muted colors during the day if it's a really bright area. And in fact, if you have to create shade because it's so bright, some calmer colors might work better. Other places to get inspiration for your color theme. Look at your favorite objects. If you have something that you collect, like some people might collect pottery, for example, and you can see right here a very nice color scheme with the green, the orange, and the blue. You can look at garden photos. Again, this photo of the plant material on the left mimics almost exactly the color of the pottery in that photo. You can go to botanical gardens because obviously they have professionals working there and they put together some very nice color schemes. And fabric is another really good place to look at different color schemes because, you know, professional designers have created those. And go to flower shops and look at their different bouquets and flower arrangements that they have. And that'll give you some good ideas, a little bit of inspiration for a theme. So again, here's a botanical garden with all their different colors. I'm trying to remember, that's the garden in Butchart Gardens, I believe, in Vancouver, Canada. The other thing is just use your favorite color and start with that. And once you pick your favorite color, then try to find some other colors that will create harmony, if it's a complementary color or an analogous color. Take your interior colors, and I put this picture of one in a bedroom, and take it outdoors. You can see the same colors in this outdoor space. So if you like it indoors, just take it outdoors. Or think about your favorite place that you've been where you really liked it. Think about the colors that were used there and try to replicate that. So here's a couple of charts that show what different colors people prefer. So overall, for everyone, the favorite color is obviously blue. And then green and purple are your next two favorite. But if you divide it out from favorite colors for women and for men, you can see blue again is the favorite color for both, but much greater percentage of men like the blue color. Purple is still really popular with women, but it doesn't even hardly show up on in fact, I don't even think it's on the chart for men as far as a favorite color. And then, you know, there's some other colors, reds and oranges. The warm colors tend to be the least favorite and the cool colors more favorite. Least favorite colors, again, orange. And this is, you know, a survey with adults. They just don't like that orange. They don't like gray either, and not particularly fond of yellow. So some of the colors that children like best, adults like least. And our color preferences change as we get older. And one of the theories is that the reason why when you're 70 years or older, that blue is by far your dominant preferred color is because our vision actually changes. And a lot of people who have vision issues, especially with cataracts, predominantly see everything with a blue cast to it. And so the blues always look richer and stronger with that blue cast. And so that's the theory as to why, as we get older, blue becomes our sole favorite color. So last, I just wanted to show you 4 different books that I use when I'm thinking about color, and you can see the Gardener's Color Palette, really good book. Some of the images in this slide were taken from that book, or in this presentation were taken from that book. The Better Homes and Garden Color is a really good book. If you want to learn more about color psychology, a lot of interesting bits of information there. And then the Pantone Color Resource talks more about the messages and meanings behind color. So these are 4 books if you want to learn more about color that I would recommend. And I think my time is about up. So thank you. And I just wanted to show you one last picture of a yard that I saw in Tacoma, Washington, I believe is where I took this picture of a very colorful yard with a bunch of warm colors, I guess you would say, is their color theme or their color inspiration. So with that, thank you very much. And I guess we're done.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hansen. That was just a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. That picture, I have to say, is kind of hard to look at.
It is. And if you think it looks wild in a picture, you should have seen it in real life. I mean, it's quite the landscape.
Yeah, I wonder how all those little pots end up staying there. Sorry, a little off track there.
Well, actually, so I did get a chance to, I stopped when I was taking the picture, the owner came out and I was talking briefly with him. They were, he was a elderly Vietnamese gentleman. And this was his passion, and he went out and he watered those pots every day, and also in his yard. And I guess he had become such an attraction in the neighborhood that people were okay with it.
Awesome. Well, we don't have too many questions, but there's 2 that I have here, and one is in the chat box. If you'd like, I can read it to you. It says, if we have more visible shades of green than any other color, why did the Royal Horticultural Society use color wheel that leans heavily on purples and reds? So a question about the color wheel.
Well, the thing about that color wheel is that it was developed just using petals from flowers. And I don't think that there are very many flowers. There are some with green petals. So that wasn't a color that was, even though we see a lot of it in the landscape, in foliage, in branching, in other plant material, that was solely based on the color of petals that they plucked off of flowers.
Great, that's so interesting. And then the only other question I'm seeing right now, Dr. Hansen, is someone also brings out the question about what about browns and grays, like in hardscape stones and flagstones, things like that.
Yeah, actually, I do have in the extended version of this talk with my students, I do talk about browns and grays and using those in rocks and even in the soil and in mulch in the landscape. And they are very much like kind of the blue colors. They're very calming color, and they represent the earth, and people associate it with good health also. And it's a very good connector color also, just like green. So you can put just about any other color with it, and it works good with just about any other color. And obviously we have it in the landscape. So, and also too, there's so many different shades of browns and grays. I would say that use sort of the lighter browns and grays, maybe with the warm colors, and some of the darker browns and grays would probably match well with some of the cooler colors.
Very nice. Okay, and here's another question that just came in. Is there a good resource for plants in Central Florida that bring color into the landscape? Any colorful favorites that you keep in mind?
A good resource for just like plants used in Florida?
Is Central Florida.
Central Florida. Yeah, not that I can think of that specifically for that area. I do have an EDIS publication. It's very brief about talking about using essentially what I just talked about in the presentation. So they can look at that and kind of, have a same information but in written. But yeah, I don't know. Another good place to find good ideas for colors, I just go like on Pinterest or all those different, websites that show different landscapes and just look at them. And if I find one that I think, oh, that looks nice, I like that color combination, I'll, screen grab it and save it for an example. Yeah, but I can't think of anything specifically for that area.
Yeah, I end up walking around, and when I see something I like, I try to take a picture of it, like when it captures my eye, so I'll remember it, because I have a really bad memory. All right, there's a few more questions coming in.
Okay.
One I thought was really interesting. If you're landscaping around a blue house, would warmer colors be better for landscaping?
I would say that warmer colors only if they are toned down and kind of in that pastel range, but it also depends on the color of blue. If it's a deeper blue, a darker blue, the lighter pastel pinks and yellows and white will really pop against that blue. On the other end, though, if the house itself is a pastel blue, then I would go more with like deeper purples and maybe even deeper blues, because those will show up. And deeper greens, like your really shiny, deep, dark greens, especially in the foliage. For example, like maybe a magnolia tree or something like that. So yeah, kind of depends on which blue you're using, or the color of blue.
Oh, wonderful. And there's one more question. Any advice on matching hardscape colors to roof colors, etc.?
Say that again.
Any advice on matching hardscape colors to roof colors?
Well, I think probably kind of going back to color theory, so one word that I didn't mention was neutral colors. That's kind of a way that, interior designers or they talk about neutral colors of being beiges and browns and grays and so forth. And so I probably would say that hardscape colors mostly are neutral unless there's some brighter browns or deeper browns in it. Even those are sometimes considered a neutral color. And just about any color goes with a neutral color. But it's the lightness or the darkness of that color. So usually, if you have light gray like this concrete in this picture here, a lighter gray, you don't want to use really light pastel colors because they'll kind of just fade into that gray and disappear. So then you want to use more saturated, deeper colors. So it could be any color like yellow, reds, blues, and purples, but use just the deeper ones, the deeper, darker colors, to kind of pop against that neutral color.
That is, once again, Dr. Hansen, I just want to thank you so much for being here. In the chat comments, people just said it was a wonderful presentation, and thank you very much. And just know that it was very well received.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I usually in my classes, I have 2 presentations, so I go a lot more into detail and color, but I can only talk so much in 45 minutes. And I think I even went over that. So, so thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right.